Hi, and welcome to another Retronaut video. So, what are we looking at today? Well, we're going to start a new series on the building of what you could call the Retronaut cabin. Until now, this channel has been recorded on this set, which I built in the summer of 2023, which at this point was last year. It's now December 2024, very quickly approaching Christmas, and I've actually moved into the cabin. This set that you see here has been temporarily transferred into the cabin to clear up space in my house. But once I've done a few videos based on the cabin build, this set will go away and we'll transfer full-time to using the cabin as the set for Retronaut Ongoing. So why did I decide to get the cabin? Well, there were a number of reasons. I was doing repairs on my dining room table in my house. Soldering, things like that, sometimes removing rust, things like that. It just really wasn't the right space for that. Previously, I discussed with my wife that it would be nice to have a space to do things like, for instance, paint things. I don't mean like heavy duty spray can, but maybe like airbrushing. And even with an airbrush, you're going to get a little bit of overspray and it might actually spray onto the table. So I didn't want to do that on the dining table, you know? I wanted to have a space where I could do that. So the answer to that problem was, I didn't do it. I wanted to do some sort of making props, you know, like for instance, getting a 3D print of say a Fallout pistol and then spray painting it and painting it up to look like a good, you know, to make it look real. And that was something I would like to do as a hobby, but I can't because I don't have the space to do that. So yeah, it would be nice to have a space to do hobbies. It'd be nice to have a space where I can do soldering without releasing noxious fumes into my own house, and making the noise and, causing problems like that. If I wanted to film on the dining room table, this was problematic as well because it's in my living space, which meant my wife couldn't be there, which made it impractical. It wasn't good for that reason as well. Then what happened is during the pandemic, I started to accumulate a collection of retro computers, as you will have seen on the channel. And that grew over time to the point where they were being stored in lots of different places in my house, which wasn't good either. In my loft, in a spare bedroom, anywhere you could name it, there was a retro PC tucked away. So all of these things accumulated to the point where I thought I did have to get myself a cabin. So I think it was March of this year, I finally got the finances together and I worked out a way that I could afford it because the fully spec cabin that I needed to do this channel was too expensive. I would have to accommodate that by doing a lot of the work myself. And I'm not a full-on DIY person, so I knew that that would mean I'd have to raise my DIY skills to another level, learn how to do certain things. But there was no option really. For instance, when the cabin would be built, I would have to demolish the shed and I would have the option of either buying a new shed or making it myself. And I looked into buying some sheds. It would actually have to be two sheds because it's a strange shape, the position where the shed is and the shape. And I just thought in the end it would make more sense if I built it myself. So that became a bit of an epic project, building the shed myself. And I had to learn how to do that. And that's been interesting. And we'll look at that in a separate video. So today we're going to kick off this series on the build of the cabin, which started in September of this year, September the 15th, I think it was a Monday, when it was delivered. And before that could happen, we had to build a foundation for the cabin. So the reason for this is that the cabin company that actually make the cabin, they, as a standard feature, offer a foundation. And that foundation is a wooden frame, which they then raise off the ground about 10 centimeters. And they hold it off the ground using a set of plastic pegs. And I have an issue in my garden where it floods. And you'll see that in the video coming up. And I really didn't want to have a wooden frame literally a few centimeters above completely saturated soil. Not saturated soil sometimes, actual several centimeters deep of water. There was the potential, in fact, for the foundation of the cabin to actually be sitting in water. It wouldn't happen very often, Probably maybe once or twice during the summer if during a thunderstorm. But obviously in the winter, especially these days with global warming, we're getting much heavier rainfall. And sometimes when it rains persistently for a few days, you get this flooding as well. So it made much more sense for me to build a concrete foundation, something sealed so the water couldn't actually get through, and something with enough height to it so that it would make sure that the foundation of the cabin never actually sat in water. And obviously it's concrete, so it's not going to rot. So I knew that that was something that I had to do. I knew it would cost a lot more than having the wooden foundation. The actual wooden foundation that they offer was actually quite cheap. I think it was like $1,500. But a concrete foundation would cost a lot more than that. You've got to buy steel for it. You've got to have the labor, etc., etc. Now, there was a shed, as I mentioned, and I'd seen photographs of that from the 1980s. And we were only about to demolish it. So I knew that if I looked after this cabin, it could last easily 40 years. It wouldn't last 40 years if it had a wooden foundation. And I knew that, for instance, because the shed had rotted in its floor. So that's one of the main weaknesses of any wooden building: the roof, the ceiling, the roof, I should say, and the floor, where it has the main contacts with water. The walls, obviously, water tends to just run down and they tend to be okay, but the floor and the roof, obviously, are the main weaknesses. So let's move on. And what we're going to do is in this video, we're going to look at the building of the foundation. It was quite a process, believe me. And I was using a builder that was basically fitting me in between other works that he had. So in the video, you'll notice that I say, a week goes by, 2 weeks go by. And the reason for this was I started the foundation, I think it was in something like June or something like that. It only had to be ready for September. So I knew that even if there were gaps of 1 or 2 weeks at a time, the foundation would actually get done just in time for the cabin build. And believe me, it was literally just in time. So anyway, let's not delay. Let's go and have a look at how we actually built the foundation for the cabin. But before we do that, let's have a quick word from our sponsor, PCB Way. PCB Way, where you can make your tech dreams a reality. And of course, it's Christmas right now. And that means that PCB Way has got its Christmas big sale on, where you can save up to 50% on certain deals. It's a really good time of year to sit down with a nice cup of hot chocolate and a mince pie and work on an electronics project, or put together something more complex maybe, using CNC machining, 3D printing, and so on. PCB Way, of course, can supply raw boards where you can make everything yourself, or they can pre-assemble the boards for you, so the choice really is yours. PCB Way really is a one-stop solution, because whether it's PCB prototyping, PCB assembly, 3D printing, or even CNC machining, PCB Way is the way. Starting with an instant quote for your PCB projects, PCB Way will leap into action, building your PCB, assembling it for you if you wish, and once it's passed their quality tests, it'll be winging its way to you in a flash. PCB Way, PCB prototyping the easy way. So let me just show you where we're going to have the cabin. It's my patio. It's a bit messy at the moment, bit of a stormy day today. So we're going to go down to the end of the garden. And at the end of the garden, you can see there's a shed. So that's where we're going to actually replace the, we're going to actually put the new cabin. So tomorrow, this shed is going to be demolished. And I'm going to have to start moving some of these plants because right now, that's where the side of the cabin will be. There's a tree here. Let me move back and show you that. There's a tree here. So the cabin kind of comes up to about here. And this is going to be the new studio where we're going to film everything. So yeah, a lot of work tomorrow. Luckily, I don't have to do it myself. I've got some guys to do it. But the shed will have to go, which is a bit unfortunate. I'll have to work out what I'm going to do with my gardening equipment. And there you are. That's where the foundation's going to go from there onwards. And as I said, work starts tomorrow. And all of these plants which are here will actually have to be moved up the garden. And the plan is that once that's done with a smaller garden, I'm going to rearrange these and actually make a more organized garden, actually plant things. I've been actually delaying planting things for quite a few years. So yeah, let's see how that goes tomorrow.
fingers crossed everything goes well. Yeah, we'll see how it goes. Okay, so today, it's the following day, and the guys are already working on the shed, and they've already moved a lot of the stuff out of it, which is all here. And I have to spend some time going through this and working out what I'm going to keep and what I'm going to throw away. The usual chance to clear out. So, yeah, just show you up here. One of the things I have to do as well is move plants. So I've cut this plant back so I can actually move it. And they're in the process of taking the shed apart. And they've also removed the entire patio in this area, which was a sort of gardening area where I used to do some preparation. So yeah, it's all going on. Loads and loads of stuff to sort out, what I'm going to throw away and what I'm going to keep. And I'll show you how this progresses as it moves along. Now we're really getting into it. It pains me to see this actually being taken apart. But it's got to be done. It's got to be done. Oh no. Oh, the shed. So, the shed is gone. Now, if you're a man or a woman, whatever, and you have your own little retreat where you keep all your gardening equipment, you know that I'll feel a bit sad about the fact that my shed is gone. But obviously, there has to be a sacrifice for something to happen. And there was actually, or there is, a fox family living underneath it. So that's the floor there. And you can just see there's a sort of shard of wood there. That's actually where the foxes were getting in and out. And there was another spot on the right-hand side. So hopefully they've run by now, and they'll find somewhere else to live. And you can actually see there's a notch in the fence. And that, I think, is where, over the years, as they've climbed over, they've actually worn a notch in the fence, which is quite funny. A little bit sad that they're going, but, you know, this is my shed, and unfortunately they'll have to find some other shed to dig under and make a little den. So starting to rain again. It's a pretty awful day. It's June, mid-June, but the weather here at the moment is just terrible. It's very unsummer-like. So yeah, I'm going to retreat back to the house and wait for the guys to come back and do a bit more work. So the builders have actually got up the floor, came up in one piece, and they're going to dismantle it. And I was very interested to see what was going on underneath the cabin. Well, sorry, underneath the shed, because there were foxes living in it. And interestingly, the space just seems to be full of bricks. And the only place I can really see that a fox could have squeezed in is in the corner here. Yeah, interesting. So that looks like they were maybe living in there. And they were getting in through the front there. So yeah, really strange. So it's the next day, and there's been quite a lot of work. So mainly, we've moved this plant here. It's quite hard to see. Oh yeah, there's a better angle. So this is the Fatsia japonica from yesterday, which has been moved down the garden. And up here, we have a big pile of rubbish because unfortunately our skip was a bit too small, so we couldn't fit everything in it. This is actually where all the plants were yesterday. We managed to get these out today with the work from the guys. Very hard work it was, actually. Especially this one. That's where the Fatsia was. Luckily, it's a very shallow rooted plant, so managed to get out with not too much work. I mean, no, actually, it was a huge amount of work, but it could have been worse. So this is the site where the cabin's going to go, and I'm very excited. There's a lot of groundwork that has to happen, and the biggest issue we have is there's a big concrete slab there. Looks like it's about 10 centimeters thick. And that might have to be broken through in a couple of places to get the foundation where we want it to be. And then over here, the concrete slab continues. This is an exploration trench just to see where it goes, and it ends there. Hopefully you can see the edge of it there. If I go around this way, you might see it a bit more easily. My shadow is touching it a little bit, actually. So there we are, just where my head is in the shadow. That's where the edge of the slab is. So it goes from all the way over there. So God knows what that used to be. That used to be something pretty substantial. But the foundation on this it's too shallow for what we want. We want to go much deeper, 30 centimeters. So the next stage is we have to wait for the builders to get their guys to basically bring a person who's more technically capable, and they're going to come in and they're going to lay out the cabin. And then we have to work out the sort of raising of gradient in the garden, because as it goes to the back, it becomes much higher by the looks of it. So it looks like we're going to have to do something to make sure that the foundations are nice and level. So yeah, still pretty messy. But apart from this big pile of rubbish, which makes it look a bit unsightly, it's all the main work is done to prepare the site. So yeah, the next video, hopefully, we'll be laying out the foundation. So it's a couple of weeks later, and the guys are back today to carry on working on the foundation. They've already been working this morning, and they put the pegs down to mark out the boundary of the cabin. I'll just walk you over it. There's still a bit of rubbish in the middle. They're also clearing that area. So yeah, there was a foundation. I'll explain this. There was a foundation that I built, and that was to extend the planning permission. This is something that we have in the UK. And it ran out at the end of March, so I had to build something to get the project underway. And that then means the planning permission carries on until the project is finished. So today, what's going to happen is, there's some concrete here, there's a patio, and it goes basically from the fence over there all the way over there. I think it stops about 2 meters away from the fence over there. So they're going to have to break through that concrete, because that's exactly where the foundation is. And although it's concrete, it's only 10 centimeters thick. You can kind of see it there. And that isn't thick enough to hold up the cabin. So they're going to have to unfortunately cut through the concrete so they can actually make the foundation, which is going to go down about 30 centimeters, 35, something like that. So there we are. That's the marking out. The fence is really destroyed because the shed used to be up against it and it rotted. And you can see there's just a little bit of rubbish left. And then today the guys are going to be cracking on and focusing on getting the foundations dug. So as that progresses, I'll show you how that goes. So it's the following day. And yeah, you can actually see now what's actually going to happen here. Well, get a better idea anyway. They've dug down on the perimeter and going across here as well. Hope you can see that. About, as I said yesterday, about 35 to 40 centimeters. I think it's about 40. We decided to go 10 centimeters deeper just to make sure that the foundation was really solid. You know, the last thing I want to do is get this cabin built and have some kind of subsidence. So yeah, it goes down 40 centimeters. This was the problem section that I showed you yesterday, which was actually in the wrong place. So they had to cut through that with a machine. So there we are, cut straight through that. And so what's the next stage? Well, we're going to order steels, because this is going to be reinforced concrete. Again, if you don't reinforce it, you can have problems with subsidence. So that's something we don't want. So we're going to get some steels ordered, and they then get put into the trenches that you see here. From what I understand, they're put on sort of like engineering bricks, and that's to keep them off the soil. They should be in the center of the hole, and then there should be like a gap of about at least 10 centimeters from the top as well. And that means that when the concrete is poured, the steel ends up encased, 10 centimeters away from the edge in all cases. So that avoids, water penetration coming in and causing problems with the steel breaking. So you must be wondering what this double trench is here. Well, this is actually the front of the cabin, but it's actually not the front of the room, because this is actually a veranda. So this particular model of cabin has got a veranda on it. It's about 1.5 meters deep. So this actually, this trench here, this actually needs to be the deepest one. It's actually not at the moment, so I'm going to ask the guys to dig that a little bit more, because that's actually going to be where the walls are. And looks like there's some pretty hefty stones down there. Not sure what they are. On the corner there. Can you see that? Yeah, it looks like there was something there before. And this is actually the room part of it. So not as big as I wanted. Originally it was going to be bigger. But as I said, because of building regulations, I couldn't have it bigger than, I think it was 30 square meters. So that's going to be the internal space on it. So the next stage is we need to get those steels ordered. And then what they're also going to do is they're going to put some shuttering. So basically that's pieces of plywood that form a box that actually go above ground level, so that when they pour the concrete in, you can actually pour it above ground level. And that will then give me some rise above the ground, because the problem is, I'll show you this area over here. This area over here, when it rains very heavily, it actually floods. It floods very heavily there. This is underneath a large sort of willow tree. And then on occasion, I've actually seen it go all the way up to about there, the flooding. So it has to be raised above the earth level here. Otherwise, when it floods, the bottom of the cabin will get soaking wet. And it's made of wood, and of course it would rot over time. So we can't really have that. So yeah, that's what the plan is. We need to get this concrete a little bit above ground level to stop flooding. So yeah, that's where we are today. And I'll give you another update when we have more to show. So what's going on today is that the steels, the reinforcement rebar, has been delivered. And the guys were here earlier, and I did actually video this, but unfortunately there was a problem with the video, so it didn't actually record. So what they've done is they put the rebar into the trenches and tied it at the ends. And that means now we're ready to go to the next stage, where we actually put wooden frames in. So originally this cabin was going to have a wooden framework for the foundation, but I was advised by another company that they felt that it wasn't actually strong enough because of the size of the cabin. They estimated the weight of the cabin would be something like 7 tons. So in the end, you know, I agonized over it, the extra cost that it would take to put all this rebar in and the concrete. But I did read up about it, and apparently cabins, if the foundation subsides, obviously what will then happen is the cabin will basically fall apart, because it relies on gravity to actually hold it together. So yeah, the rebar is actually held off the earth with bricks. I think they call them engineering bricks. But there you are, it's going along the full length of the trench. And then it's tied at the corners with wire to hold it all together. And then the idea is that the rebar doesn't actually touch the side of the trench. It does actually in a couple of places, so I don't know how they're going to fix that. But then what will happen is we'll have some wooden frames built above this, and that will then contain the concrete when it's poured, so that we can actually get the edge of the foundation above the earth. And the reason why we need to do that is because this part of the garden floods. This part especially, under the tree here. I actually took some footage of a flood that happened, I think it was last summer. It was a nice day, all of a sudden there was a thunderstorm and it rained a lot. And when I went out, it actually flooded just as much as it ever did in the winter. And in fact, I've never actually seen it go this far up the garden, but this is well into the area where the cabin is going to be. That's why I'm taking a lot of effort in actually doing the foundation, because I do not want the cabin, which is obviously made of wood, sitting in water during the winter. It'll just rot. And we obviously don't want the foundation to rot. That would be horrible. So yeah, that's what we've got done today. It's slowly progressing. The next stage now is to get the guys in to do the frames, and hopefully that will happen this week. So I will show you that when that's underway. So about a week and a half has passed, and the guys working here today, they've gone for lunch. So I'm taking advantage of the quiet moment to show you what we're up to today. So the trench that the concrete that will be poured into for the foundation, that is actually at ground level. And you can see here that where the wood is actually touching ground level. And the wood is about, I think it's about 15 centimeters high. And the reason for that is that this area is flooded. I've mentioned it before. So what we've got to do is we've got to make sure that the concrete foundation goes above the ground level, because onto this foundation of concrete, we're going to have a wooden foundation, which is what actually the cabin is built onto. And the other thing as well is that with this little bit of extra height above the ground, it will actually allow us to have a step to step up onto the decking, which is actually where I'm standing now. So there'll be some decking here, and this is going to be the veranda for the cabin. So yeah, at the moment, the guys are working on getting this riser to go all the way around, and it has to completely enclose the foundation. I'll show you that once it's actually finished. And then what they're going to do is, for instance, you can see here, I think you can see that, there's actually a gap between the wood and the trench. So they're going to actually have to fill that hole there with wood, I think. And then they're going to use this earth, which has been left in the middle of the area, to actually then pack in against that wood to stop the concrete from pouring out when they actually pour the concrete. So there was a bit of a miscalculation. So there's not quite enough concrete. So it looks like we're not going to be able to do it tomorrow. The plan was originally to do it tomorrow. So we're going to have to wait a couple of days for some more concrete and ballast to be delivered. And then we will actually be able to pour the concrete into the foundation. Now the whole land actually is a little bit sloped in various dimensions. You can probably see that the back is going up and to the left. So yeah, we've got to make sure that obviously we have enough shuttering so that when the concrete is poured, it will actually produce a nice level result. And you can see, like I said, in various places there are sort of gaps. There's a gap here which needs to be filled in. Like I said, I'm not quite sure how they do that, but we'll have to, it's going to have to be not watertight, but concrete tight, so that when they pour in the concrete, it doesn't flow out. So yeah, I'll show you that a little bit later once it's all sort of ready to go. So it's a little bit later the same day. Sun has come out for a change, which is nice. And they've finished for today. And as you can see, there's quite a bit of a structure going on here. It's a bit clearer now what exactly is going to happen. You can see that there's a channel now where the concrete's going to be poured into. I think they've decided that because the height of the foundation is higher than they expected, they're actually going to try and move the reinforcement up a bit. So they're going to actually put double the amount of bricks underneath the actual concrete at the bottom there, which will, you know, raise up the reinforced bar a bit. There's not much more to say right now. As I said, you know, this is basically to make sure that the foundation at the, and let me just move over here so you can see this, so that the foundation at the front here is 15 centimeters above the level of the ground, because otherwise, if it does flood, which it probably will, because these days we're getting more extreme weather with global warming, more flooding. Yeah, we just get very heavy thunderstorms, and it can kind of flash flood. Not massive flooding, but you know, it can be 5 centimeters deep. And we've just got to make sure that the foundation of the cabin doesn't get moist, because we don't want it to rot, do we? So yeah, pretty soon, this will be the space where we will have the new studio. Really looking forward to it. Getting very excited now because, you know, it's actually looking a little bit more like the sort of foundations of a cabin. Quite a bit of a dip here. Need to get the guys to fill this in. Lots of earth needed for that. But there we are. So yeah, just wait a couple of days for some more concrete to be delivered. It's just amazing how much stuff you need to fill this in. So once we've got that, they're going to pour the concrete, and we should actually have the first actual concrete foundations for the cabin roll on that day. So another week has passed, and today they're pouring the concrete. So I'll just show you the progress that they've made. And it rained just now. They're actually having lunch at the moment, having a break, because they've been working very hard. And so it turns out that for each bag of concrete powder, you need 8 bags of ballast. And this is the ballast here. And there was a bit of a panic earlier today because it turned out that it didn't look like we had quite enough ballast. And it seems to be a little bit tricky to actually calculate the correct volume of concrete powder and so on and so forth. So they just quickly rushed off to get another van load of ballast, because it did look like we had enough concrete, but not enough ballast. So what's actually been done so far? So you can see there's the trench. And as they've been pouring it, they've been agitating the concrete mix so that it actually then flows around the iron reinforcement, as we've seen before. And so far they've done the front foundation, the foundation, which is 1.5 meters behind it, and that represents the veranda of the porch. So in reality, this front foundation didn't really need to be quite as deep as the rear one, but as we're doing everything, we may as well keep it uniform, right? It's just easier to work on that. And they've poured all the way to the back up there. So I'll just show you that. And the aim is to try and get this all done by the end of the day, which is going to be a little bit of a push, but it should be all right. They've gone off for now to recuperate. And you can see there's the reinforcement and the concrete is flowing over it. So it takes, from what I understand, about between 24 hours and 48 hours for concrete to dry. It's a relatively moist day today. It's quite humid, so hopefully that means it's not going to set too quickly, because obviously over lunch, while they're away, it's obviously drying. So we don't want to end up with dry joints, if you know what I mean. We want it to all be one continuous piece of concrete, ideally. So you can see, yeah, they've got to there. And I think that's all I can really show you for now. So what we'll do is we'll leave it and we'll come back a little bit later today when they finish pouring the concrete, and I'll show you the end result. So it's the following day and pretty much everything is done now. If I show you this area, this is, as we saw earlier, the veranda area. And over here, which we saw yesterday, she wasn't quite finished yet. You can actually see that they've done this later. And you can see that the concrete there is still actually wet, because that was probably one of the last bits they actually did. But all the way to the back now, it's nice and even. And I've been assured that if there are any issues with the leveling, which they will do with the final woodwork foundation, they will actually use wedges and packing to make sure that it's completely level for when the cabin actually goes onto it. So yeah, we'll just have to wait now. Another few days for the guys to be free, and we'll carry on with the wooden foundations. Another week has gone by, and it's another really hot day. 28 degrees, I think, was the forecast, but I think it's going to be more like 32 degrees. And so the guys have been busy again, and what they've done is, over the last weekend, it's actually Monday now, and they were here today again doing a bit of work. They've removed all the shutters from the foundation, so the foundation is obviously proud of the ground now. You can see it there. I asked them to try and keep as much of the wood as they could that wasn't actually, you know, badly damaged by being used. And I think, hopefully, I can make most of my shed at the back with that wood. Might have to order a couple of pieces of wood, not sure really. I'll have to work out a design to kind of use that. But there was originally a shed, do you remember, in the corner? And that got destroyed, obviously, to make room for the cabin. But I do need a shed. I have to have somewhere to put all my garden equipment. So I'm hoping that I can actually make my shed out of that, plus maybe a bit of new plywood to do the roof. So the concrete foundation is ready. It's looking really nice and sharp now. And they also did some filling in work as well to actually make sure that the ground was nice and level around it. That's why it's looking so neat now. The next stage is we're going to get some wood ordered like this. This kind of dimension. I think this is maybe 2x4, something like that. But we need some longer pieces that can actually span the full length of here. And what's going to happen is there's going to be a frame which is on the outside of the foundation that you can see here. And then there will be some joists, you know, pieces of wood like these, possibly a bit thicker, not sure, that have to span that width there. So the 5 meter long pieces of wood, 5.4 meter pieces of wood. And then we need to have posts put in the ground, which will then, oh look, there's a little robin over there. Don't know if you can see that. They love earth that's been dug. They're always looking for worms. So yeah, it's a bit of a fallacy that robins only appear in the winter. They're actually always here. But most of the time in the summer, they're hidden out of the way. Anyway, back to the joists. So yeah, the joists have to span across that space. Obviously, this space here is small, so they won't need any support. But over this distance, because it is 5.4 meters, there's going to be some kind of support in the middle to stop it sagging. Because we don't want the floor of the cabin to be bowed, you know, when you're walking in it. So yeah, that's going to add quite a bit of extra height on top of this. And, you know, the main reason for this whole concrete foundation was to stop it sinking in the soil, because the soil here is quite clay. And it's also to stop it getting flooded. But now there's a good 20 centimeters clearance there above the ground. So even if it rains a lot, the cabin is never going to be sitting in a pool of water. So it's going to remain safe. So yeah, I'm going to get back indoors because I don't want to melt. And we'll catch up again as soon as the guys are here working on the wooden foundation. So earlier today, the guys were back and they're working on the wooden foundation. And you can see them here. They're actually working on getting the noggins put in, and they actually give extra strength to the sides of the frame. which is actually where the walls are. So those noggins have to basically replicate the strength that goes underneath the floor, forwards and back. So if I actually show you how it came out, this is the finished job. And this is where they were actually working on the noggins. And yeah, the wall will actually run along here and will stop here. And all the way to the back of there is where the actual cabin is. The joists run from the back to the front. And then what's going to happen is on the installation day, they're going to build another floor on top of this where the joists actually run from left to right. So they will then sit on top of these joists. So you'll have a double set of joists basically, which will give the floor quite a lot of strength. What else needs to be done? Well, do you see the middle there? There are some noggins actually holding the joists together in the middle to give it a bit of extra strength. Well, there are some wooden posts there, and I believe those are temporary. What's going to happen is we're going to have plastic posts, and they're plastic because they won't rot. You know, they're going to be in close proximity with the earth. And they're going to then hold up each of these joists at 1 meter center. So every 1 meter, there will be one of these plastic posts. And that will actually then give even more strength to the joist to make sure that the floor in the center of the cabin doesn't sag, you know, with the weight of the equipment and tables and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, another week and more progress. And oh yeah, also at the back of the cabin, we have to have a new shed because if you remember from the video earlier, we had the shed in this area here. The problem was that shed, because it was placed right against the fence, actually caused the fence to rot. And it also meant that we couldn't actually maintain this area because we have these really large pine trees. And what we have to do is every now and again, we have to cut these trees back. So the arborists, they need to get in there. And I've moved the concrete pad here for the shed a little bit further forward. And that's going to make sure that we don't end up blocking off the fence. We can actually maintain it. On the downside, it does mean that the shed is going to be rather thin. I think it's like 1 meters 30 wide, which is actually very tiny. But my plan is I'm going to put a door on either end. And you also see that it's actually above the ground by about 10 centimeters. Well, that means then we can actually put gravel around it. So it's going to have gravel here, I think. And then possibly down the side here, there's going to be gravel. And then on top of the gravel, I'm going to have paving slabs to give me a nice pathway on either side of the cabin. So yeah, there's the shed. Looking forward to getting that installed. Again, all the equipment which is currently sitting in the back garden underneath tarpaulins all just out in the sun, getting that back under cover again. So the next stage now is we need to have this inspected by the cabin people, making sure that it's actually correct. And then hopefully with all that being correct, then we just need to wait until September the 15th, which is a few weeks away from now, which is really good. We've got plenty of time. They're then going to turn up and actually install the cabin. So that'll be the next big phase. And also we've got to start thinking about the electrics as well, getting the electrics installed. But I was going to do that before the cabin was installed, but now I think about it, it might be better to wait until it's installed and then actually get that done when the actual cabin's there. So it'll be easier for the electrician to just go ahead and do the full job. So yeah, back soon with more once we get something going on. So it's been a few months since the last part of this video. I've just been waiting a while for more funds to come through to work on the cabin. And we're just sort of in the final stretch, really. Installation goes ahead on Monday. And what the guys are doing at the moment is they're putting in posts. And these posts are just basically to hold up the floor so that there's no sort of sag or bounce in the floor once the cabin goes on. Yeah, a little bit overkill. There's like one post every 1 meter. Hopefully you can see them there, black. And they're actually made out of recycled plastic. And I think the idea about that is that they won't rot because they have to go into little pads of concrete there. Do you see those sort of mounds of concrete? So yeah, it's just going to give extra stability to the foundation, the wooden part of it, and stop it wobbling around and stop any sort of bowing or sagging in the middle of the cabin. So, and like I said, pretty excited. Monday is when they actually turn up with the cabin and they start installation. So that's going to be pretty hectic because I'm actually doing insulation for it, which is actually currently dominating our living room. So fingers crossed everything goes okay. Everything goes as smoothly as possible on Monday. So there we go. The foundation was built. As I said earlier at the beginning of this video, it was quite a saga, wasn't it? How can I describe this process? It was actually quite emotional.
I've been living in this house for about 7 years now. And during that time, I've learned how to do gardening. And it's one of the main reasons why I moved into the house was to get a garden. And if you're a gardener, you'll know that your shed is one of the sort of little nexuses of your little hobby. It's where you keep your lawnmower, your pots, trimmer, things like that. It's a storeroom, and it's just a place that you get used to going into. And I'd looked after it over the years. When I moved into my house, the shed was actually in pretty bad condition. There was a leak in the roof. The previous owner had let the pine trees behind it grow a branch into the felt of the roof, and it had lifted the felt, and it had caused the back of the shed roof to rot quite badly. I really don't understand why they allowed that to happen, because at the end of the day, it's their shed. And when it's rotten and gone, that would be the end of it. It's possible that they inherited that from the previous owner. So anyway, I'll cut them some slack on that maybe. But anyway, the moment where the shed got demolished, if you listen to the video, obviously you'll have heard earlier that I got quite emotional. It's just sad to see. It was a well-built shed, and it served me, and obviously its original owner must have loved it. I remember one of the things I noticed about it was it actually had a doorbell in it. So he originally had it wired up so that he could hear the doorbell on the front of the house being rung when he was inside it. So it must have been used for hobbies as well, I suppose, because he'd actually taken that much effort to put a doorbell on it. But anyway, it had to go, along with the shed being demolished as well. Obviously, there was the issue about the foxes living under it. I wasn't really sure at that point if they were living under it. They had been earlier in the spring. I'd seen baby foxes coming out from underneath it again. But it was kind of different to the first time that we saw that, because the first time they were coming out almost every day, and there were 3 of them. And on this occasion, I think I only saw maybe 1 or 2. I can't even remember if it was 2. So there's the possibility that the mother was inexperienced and the foxes died, or that she was spooked for some reason, or she found a better place for them to live, and she moved the babies to that new location. All that I know is that when it came to the point of actually demolishing the shed, there wasn't a fox in sight. We never saw a single fox when it was to be demolished. So that was a worry that was removed in the end. It's kind of sad that they've lost their little house, but at the end of the day, it was something that had to go for me to make room for the cabin. And I'm sure they would have found somewhere else in the area to make a little den. The finishing of the foundation was actually just in the nick of time. And the reason for that was I was waiting for some funds to come through to buy the plastic pegs that, as you saw in the last section, held up the wooden frame. I did kind of overspec that, I suppose. I think that was the cabin company. They said that there were these pegs every 1 meter. But when I went to actually have a look at their own foundations, I found that they very often didn't have that density of pegs. But I decided to stick with that anyway, because I thought, it'll make a very nice solid floor. And I didn't like the idea of the pegs on their own being used to hold up a wooden frame, because the cabin is probably, several tons. And I was worried that those pegs would obviously sink into the ground over time. But I know for a fact that the cabin is resting on concrete all the way around its perimeter, and the veranda front and back is resting on solid concrete, and that's not going to go anywhere. So it's only the interior space of the cabin which is actually held up by those pegs. So it's there really as an extra support to stop, the joists moving up and down. And the cabin, now that it's built, is actually very solid. So it's definitely worth the money. So anyway, that's it for the foundation. And in the next video, we're going to look at, I believe, the delivery of the cabin and the start of the build. And in the last section, I think it was just like the Saturday before the delivery. So I was very, very nervous. But I knew that the foundation was good. We had the garden cleared to allow them to bring in the timber and start building the cabin. So yeah, we just have to wait and see what happened on the day that the build took place. I was going to actually put the insulation into the cabin myself, big boards of Celotex, which is a foam insulation board with aluminium foil. I had arranged with a painter decorator to help me to do that. That person was also working as a general refurber builder. So basically, it was just me and him. We're then going to put those foam boards in as we went along. And the reason why I did that was because it was a lot cheaper than getting the cabin company to do it. They charged an arm and a leg basically to do that. I think they were working out to have something like a profit of £1,200 on that, which is crazy because it's basically one day's labor. So that was something I was nervous about because I knew that they would be building the cabin and I'd have to fit in between. So yeah, pretty nervous. Anyway, we'll look at that in the next video. I hope you enjoyed this video and a little insight into the work that went into getting the cabin built, which is something that we'll be seeing pretty soon, the fruits of that labor. And if you did enjoy the video, please click on the like button down there. Give the like button a hit, give it a donk. And if you did like this video, and especially if you haven't been on this channel before, please click on the subscribe button and join the channel. And make sure that you hit the bell, because the bell will obviously notify you when we release any more videos. So if you enjoyed this video and you want to see the rest in the series, make sure you hit the bell, okay? Otherwise you might miss the next episode, which is coming up pretty soon. Anyway, until then, have a good time and I'll catch you then. Take care.